they do.
Yeah. Now he,
It could go either way, huh?
We don't know, we don't wanna know.
he texted me,
One of the three of you needs to kinda be the leader.
so he,
Right.
so just so.
Go for
You
it,
wanna
Bonnie.
do it, Bonnie?
Mm-hmm.
As soon as she swallows, we'll start the meeting.
Councilmember Bonnie Finley called the meeting to order.
I call us to order.
Are we gonna have a roll call?
I already did it, thanks.
Oh, a passive roll call, but then it's not on the audio
I don't
recording.
have the agenda in front of me, but who's
Yeah.
next?
Well, you have two things. You have your board and commission updates, but then you have the opportunity discussions. You can do them whichever order you want to.
I think we should let Jessica go first.
And just so everyone knows what we'll do for the other council members, we mentioned this with Polly, that we'll do a separate meeting.
Okay.
We're gonna do that with others, and, sounds like we may have another group of 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry, Jessica, that we're not all here. It's kind of.
Trying.
Yeah.
The important ones are here, so it's okay.
Yeah,
Go
absolutely.
ahead. Okay. I did bring some way too many, handouts apparently.
Thank you. Do you want one back?
Scott, do you want?
Yeah.
John, you need one?
You got one?
You got one?
Hi, John, I didn't even see you sitting over there.
He was so quiet.
He was quiet today.
Oh,
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for giving me some time this morning. It's been a little challenging to get on your agenda, which is very understandable considering all else that's going on in the world. So again, really appreciate getting a little bit of time this morning to update you a little bit on Opportunity Zones Inform for anyone that's not totally familiar with what the Opportunity Zone program is and how it applies and where in Longmont we have that designation. So I'll start with a little bit of history and description of the program because we have heard some misinformation out there, so just wanna make sure that everyone is fully informed with accurate information about what the Opportunity Zone program is. The Opportunity Zone program was part of, included in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was passed in December of 2017, but it does have a much longer history than that. The idea was actually conceived of by a group called the Economic Innovation something, a think tank in Washington DC, an economic development think tank in Washington DC back in 2015. Never really went anywhere from there in terms of any kind of federal legislation, but in early 2017, Cory Booker and Cory Booker from New Jersey and Tim Scott from South Carolina got together and created legislation that basically replicated the intention of the Opportunity Zone with some minor changes to what was originally conceived of. The legislation, I can't remember, was not introduced, or I believe it was introduced in February of 2017 but never passed. And so then when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act came, it was actually Tim Scott that suggested that they include the Opportunity Zone piece in that legislation, and in fact was going to withhold his vote on Tax Cuts and Jobs Act if the Opportunity Zone piece was not included in that. And so the Opportunity Zone legislation was enacted as part of that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and that was in December of 2017. And so it actually took effect January 1, 2018. However, we still don't have all of the rules and the documentation and everything that will be involved in somebody actually, or a community actually being able to take advantage of that. So that's been a little bit slower. We're supposed to this month, although this month is passing pretty quickly, at least have the documentation that will be required for somebody when filing their taxes to be able to claim Opportunity Zone benefits. The idea behind the Opportunity Zone legislation is that the assumption is that at any given time there's about $6 trillion in unrecognized capital gains sitting on the sidelines avoiding capital gains taxes. And the Opportunity Zone gives investors the opportunity, which I keep saying I need to find a synonym for, the opportunity to take advantage of some pretty significant tax benefits by rolling those capital gains into investments within opportunity zone designated areas. So governors in all of the 50 states were given the opportunity to nominate and have approved these opportunity zone census tracts across their states. Each state had their own way of designating opportunity zones within their state. Hickenlooper's office and the State Office of Economic Development were very fair and equitable and gave all of us locally a pretty significant opportunity to have input on those census tracts that would be designated in Colorado. They did, however, from the very beginning, have an emphasis on census tracts that were off the Front Range, so rural and outstate Colorado census tracts. So from the very beginning, they were committed to 60% of all Colorado opportunity zone census tracts being in off the Front Range, basically, and then the other 40% were Front Range communities were eligible to pursue the other 40% of nominated census tracts. And so at the end of the day, the city of Longmont was able to, through the Longmont Economic Development Partnership, was able to get 2 census tracts designated as opportunity zones, and those are represented in the map that I have provided to you. So what will happen is that individuals will be able to take capital gains out of another investment that can be a stock portfolio, real estate investment, anything that would involve capital gains if and when liquidated, and reinvest those into opportunity zone investments that can come in the form of primarily real estate for new development or redevelopment, and then also entrepreneurial startup investments. So people can invest in startup businesses, and the way they're able to, the rules create an environment where opportunity zone investments can go to startup businesses or entrepreneurial businesses and not established businesses, is that there's a requirement that the business is expected to or projected to double in value over a certain period of time in order for that investment to be eligible for opportunity zone investment. So for example,
If it's projected to double and doesn't, what happens?
There's not. So obviously, investing in a startup or an angel fund or something like that, or a venture capital fund that's investing in startups within opportunity zones, there's not.
There's not a baseline.
Right, there's a risk, and part of the idea is that the opportunity zone benefits are helping to mitigate that risk, so you'll recognize those benefits even if that investment doesn't pan out or show a return.
So they can invest in an established company, for example, a franchise or a hotel chain.
Right,
or
yes,
it
exactly.
has to be a new.
It's
okay.
not intended for that purpose. There are some people trying to figure out some ways around that, and so
course.
we'll watch that. In Colorado, OEDIT has expressed some interest in kind of being on the forefront of figuring out how opportunity zone investments can be leveraged for existing established businesses. But
What's ODIT?
sorry, the State Office of Economic Development, Colorado Office of Economic
okay.
Development. Yep. And so what happens is if somebody takes funds out of an existing investment, rolls them over into an opportunity zone investment, there are a variety of benefits that are described in this handout that I gave you. There's a temporary deferral benefit, so those that investment, if left in an opportunity zone investment for 5 to 7 years, the capital gains on those dollars that are going into that investment are deferred for 5 to 7 years. And then there's also a basis increase for those investment for capital gains of 10% after 5 years, an additional 5% after 15 years. So basically a 15% discount on your capital gains taxes
So-
once those come due.
This is probably, you all know this answer, but I'm gonna ask it anyway.
Sure.
So the capital gains in an investment opportunity would basically equal the equity earned in that? Because you're saying that they have to wait 5 to 7 years
Mhm.
to reinvest that capital gains. Are you talking about pulling that out, or?
No.
Cause I thought you could only use capital gains when you sold something, like.
Right, and yes, exactly. So you're going to, the investor is going to liquidate one investment, reinvest it in the opportunity zone.
Okay, that's the part
And then, so kind of like a 401k rollover
Got it.
or a 1031 exchange kind of concept. And then for the first 5 years and up to 7 years that investment is left in the opportunity zone investment, those capital gains are deferred and discounted. And then after 7 years, the capital gains on that initial investment does come due with that discount of either 10 or 15%, depending on how long it's been in there.
Okay.
Most,
Good examples in here though.
yes, there
Good
are,
examples.
yeah, there are examples in this,
Okay.
and they're based on, I mean, it's really easy math, they use $100 investments to do math. That's
Good.
the math I like.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
it's much easier to read this and see it, I'm visual, so I have to see it.
Yeah.
And then the most significant benefit is that if that investment is left in the opportunity zone for at least 10 years or more, any return on that opportunity zone investment, capital gains are forgiven. There are no capital gains due on the return on that opportunity zone investment. So I invest in real estate development and whatever my return is over, 10, 15, 25 years, whatever I pull out of that, because I've already paid the capital gains, the deferred and discounted capital gains on what I put in, whatever I pull out, capital gains is forgiven. There's no capital gains liability on that return.
No tax.
No capital gains tax. Yeah, so that's the big one. And so, again, the program is really intended to, there was a distress criteria that had to be met first for a census tract to be eligible, and then we also had to show opportunity for investment and challenges to attracting private capital to those areas. So the combination of need and opportunity had to be shown in order for us to get designation for opportunity zones. And the intention from the very beginning, going back to 2015, was to support investments in things like affordable and workforce housing development, redevelopment in areas like our downtown or the river corridor, and then, as I mentioned, entrepreneurial development. And so investment is going to look like a couple of different scenarios. There can be a single purpose, single investor opportunity fund. Opportunity fund designation is self-certification. So I can go buy a piece of real estate with my capital gains from another investment, buy a piece of real estate, develop it or redevelop it, self-certify as an opportunity fund for that single purpose with me as the individual investor, file a document with my tax return, self-certifying myself as an opportunity fund and take advantage of those opportunity fund benefits. There can also be a single purpose fund with multiple investors. So it can be a single project, again, that same piece of real estate that I purchased to develop, and I'm bringing in additional investors for that project. All of those investors can pool together into a single purpose fund, and all of those investors would be able to take advantage of those opportunity zone benefits.
Even if they're not a resident of the state, they can be from anywhere?
Yes, yeah, and we'll get to that. And so, to that point, there are currently being established national funds, and we expect that there will be more. So these are gonna look more like investment funds managed by fund managers.
Okay.
Chase has a fund. There are also some nonprofit foundations that are looking at creating funds, and these would be investors investing into a pooled fund that would be invested into opportunity zone areas by a fund manager looking for the highest potential rate of return for their investor in that fund.
Okay.
That was the question I had been waiting to ask, and I
Yes.
still don't understand the answer.
Sure.
Obviously, so if a nonprofit establishes a fund in an opportunity zone, you get investors.
Mhm.
The investors get the benefit of capital gains deferral and
Mhm.
forgiveness. But is it still a nonprofit if there's a return on investment above that?
No, it would be a separate entity. So a fund has to be an LLC or a corporation or a partnership. So the fund would be it could be managed by a nonprofit foundation, and there's still a lot of questions around this, so you're not the only one asking. So it would still be, or even a governmental entity could create a fund, but that fund would be established as a separate corporation or partnership.
Okay, so the fund is not nonprofit.
Right,
The
yes.
fund can be, for example, a capital investment fund
Right.
for some objective of the nonprofit, but that
Yes.
fund can promise or,
Yes.
you know,
Exactly.
can have a goal, a
Yeah.
target ROI
Yeah.
or something.
And there's actually an equity requirement, for, opportunity zone funds. So the investment has to include taking up some equity in something. So-
Secure it.
Right, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
So,
Makes
so
sense.
theoretically, the way I looked at it is, so if you wanted to generally build, let's say say Aaron was gonna build a hotel convention center, performing arts center, sort of real world topics,
Right.
then he would build the pro forma to say, here's what it looks like and here's what the equity piece is going to be on this project. Then you could develop, and you could theoretically have multiple funds invested in it too, right?
yes, absolutely.
So you could have a national fund with Chase come in and say, okay, I wanna put $5 million into this. We could develop a local fund for local investors and they could put money into it. And so then it comes together, and so you actually fund the construction of that and the operation.
Mhm.
And then depending on whether it's really patient capital or somewhat patient capital, they all start receiving the benefits of this program out
Tax
of that
different,
process.
which would be tax.
Yeah.
Right, it's
Yeah,
what are you
that's
trying,
basically
what are you
what it
trying to
is.
do?
Yeah.
So you have multiple opportunity funds coming in to fund a project in an opportunity zone.
Uh-huh.
It's just like private investment coming in.
Yeah,
And the opportunity funds, it sounds like, actually operate as a bank. I mean, they need equity, they give money, is there interest paid on that?
Well, there could be, right?
Right,
yes, absolutely, yep,
so, okay.
I mean, that would be.
yeah, and that would be part of the return, just like any
Exactly.
other
Yeah,
investment.
that would be a clean way
Yeah.
to define the return.
Yeah,
And the other question that I had about that was the equity requirement. So in Harold's example, for example, you might want to acquire the land.
mm-hmm,
Would that count as the equity?
yes, yep,
Or just give them the bottom floor of the hotel.
Well, that's how you have to structure the deals, because you may
Yeah.
have pieces of a deal that aren't going, they may only generate, let's say, 2% equity, but you may have other pieces of the deal that will generate 7 to 10% equity. And it's the overall equity that you're looking at, and, I mean, that's how I see it
Yeah.
coming together, is that?
And that's all the
Yeah.
investors care about.
right,
Right.
yeah,
They're in it for the,
equity and
For
return
the
and
return.
exactly.
the not having to pay capital gains,
But that is in itself something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yes. And so to Harold's point, the last kind of form of opportunity fund that, we'll definitely see and we have some potential for here in Longmont are local funds. So these would be local funds, local investors, funding local projects. And one of the things that we've been looking at for actually a couple of years is, the development of a local angel fund for investing in local entrepreneurs. And so now we're looking at how do we leverage opportunity zone and create an opportunity fund, for an angel fund. Or, Launch Tennessee actually has, which is a startup organization in Tennessee, has a model, is developing a model where they're just matchmaking investors with startups that are established within their opportunity zone areas. So instead of going through all of the legal and financial burdens of creating a fund, they're just playing matchmaker for startups seeking investment and investors seeking investments in opportunity zone entrepreneurial businesses or startup businesses. So we'll be looking at some of those things.
So if someone like me who is old
Mhm.
has a tax deferred mutual fund
Mhm.
that, because it's tax deferred, I have to move the money
Right.
at some point.
Yes.
Those should be capital gains.
Mhm.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
not like a 401K, the initial money was post-tax.
Right.
But the
Yeah.
taxes on any gains are deferred. that money could be rolled over into an opportunity fund?
Right, yes, for purposes of deferring discounting and then forgiving the return on that investment relative to the capital gains. It doesn't do anything with the income tax, the deferred income tax liability.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
what's the, I've never been able to figure that out, maybe you know. What part of that is deferred income tax versus, deferred income tax in a 401K,
Right,
but if.
oh, yeah, if you, yeah.
But just a deferred, they call them annuities, although it's not an annuity yet,
Yeah.
really. You know, it could become one, but if it's one of those vehicles
Mhm.
where everything you put into, you dumped into it in the beginning was post-tax dollars.
Oh, post-tax, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
post-tax, then, so I put in 60, it's now worth $260,000.
Right.
Then.
Yeah, so you would have
all
capital gains
that
liability on that, yeah.
$200,000 of capital gains liability.
Yeah.
Which would be an excellent place to put that.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
So wanting to be very clear that, the federal government, other than the rules and parameters that have been established, determining what is an eligible investment, what's not an eligible investment, how those dollars can be spent, there is no governmental control over, and especially at the local level, over how these benefits will be used or what opportunity zone investments will be taking advantage of these investments. In fact, people using opportunity zone benefits don't have to tell us, they don't have to tell you, they don't have to tell me. The only person that they have to tell is the IRS when they file their tax return.
That was gonna be my question, who's the oversight on that?
Yes,
Yeah,
it is very.
I can see this could go real fast.
Yes, absolutely, and that's
Yeah.
that is absolutely being looked at, so, what really our role as a Longmont EDP, city council, city staff, the community at large is not to be able to control or manage or oversee how this is being used, but to influence how these benefits are being used. And one way that communities are doing that, across the country, and several have come out with theirs already, is developing an investment prospectus for the community for opportunity zone investment. And so that's really going to be the next step for us, and really what I wanted to talk to you briefly about today, just start that conversation, because one of the key components of attracting investment to the types of projects that we would like to see develop in our opportunity zone area is going to be buy-in from the municipality in the form of buy-in from city council. Because one of the things that investors are going to want to know is that if they invest in property within our opportunity zone area, they're not going to face a bunch of challenges and hurdles that prevent them from actually doing the development that's going to generate the return that they need to actually recognize the benefits of the opportunities. One of the requirements, in fact, is that substantial improvements, either in new development or redevelopment, be made to an opportunity fund property within 30 months of acquisition of that property as an opportunity fund investment. And so that lends itself to needing to be able to, or needing to understand what the potential hurdles are going to be for development of that property. And if one of those hurdles is going to be, it needs city council, and city council's not a big fan of this project or this type of project in this area, that's one of the factors of risk that they're going to be looking at that will suggest that this is maybe not a good investment for opportunity fund investment. And so that's where you and the city have the opportunity to have some influence over the types of investment that we're attracting to our community. So we're going to be leading the effort to develop an investment prospectus and convening a group of interested parties, primarily from city staff, and also want to find out from you what you want your role to be in that, to start to put a plan, a strategy around these census tracts for the types of investment, the types of projects that we want to pursue as a community that meet the economic development vision and goals of the community, because it's really intended to be an economic development program. And so when we look at the census tracts that we do have designated, there are certainly, we look, the entirety of downtown is located. So there are some Definitely some project redevelopment opportunities there, and so we've been working closely with Kimberly on this, have already met with her board of directors to talk about some of the possibility and potential. So we'll have to look at our census tract, the census tracts that we have designated, and make a couple of determinations. First off, one is, are we going to be promoting through our investment prospectus this as one large opportunity zone area, or does it make more sense to, it likely doesn't make sense to divide it based on the boundaries of the census tracts themselves, because they cut downtown right in half, so that's probably not a good idea.
One
But
side of the street is in.
right, yeah, so, but we can also look at subsections of these census tracts and what makes sense in terms of timing, in terms of potential for investment, in terms of, project readiness and, short-term opportunity for investment. So likely what we'll look at is a downtown Longmont investment prospectus for opportunity zone investment, and then look at maybe the river corridor separately. That's much longer term, likely, potential investment. But one of the things that you'll have to consider as we look at developing an investment prospectus for the river corridor is, the question of the 150-foot setback, riparian setback. You, as council, have made the determination that you're going to make those decisions about and make those approvals of if and when you will allow for somebody to develop within that setback. That's something that we're gonna have to have a good understanding of, not necessarily specific projects that you would consider for that, if you're gonna be considering anything for that, but maybe types of developments that you would be more open to having that discussion about, because we don't wanna go out and pursue investment for development that would require,
Oversight.
right, exactly, without having some level of confidence that that's going to be allowed and that that's going to be a good investment.
So, on the river corridor, then would you come to council first before you even looked at investors?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But in developing the investment prospectus, again, we have to have an understanding of
idea.
what we're pursuing.
You know what
our
I
vision
think
for that is.
would, be helpful to me,
Mhm.
would be to go out and actually look at all of these areas in here while we decide what type of investment we think should go
Mhm.
there. We can't really make a decision like, I'm not sure exactly what's
Yeah.
right over here, or I'm not sure exactly what's down here.
Mhm.
We need to go look at it.
Yeah, yep. And so that's the first step of developing the investment prospectus, and we've started that work in terms of assessing what the opportunities are, what the land opportunities are, what the redevelopment opportunities are, for those census tracts. Downtown, I think, becomes a little bit more clear very early on, but then some of the other areas, and then,
Downtown would
you know,
be the easy one.
right, yeah, and then the sugar mill
Especially
is.
9th to 23rd, night on Main
Oh.
Street.
That's not.
That's not in there.
It
What
only
is
goes
this,
up to
what is
nine.
this dividing line?
Oh, it
So
does.
the north boundary
Yeah,
is
that-
basically Ninth.
Ninth Avenue,
The
okay.
western boundary is basically Hover, the eastern boundary for the most part is Lashley, with the exception of that dog leg that goes out and encompasses the sugar mill area, and then the south boundary is basically the river.
Is our transit station in here? I can't
Yes.
quite
Yeah.
see
Yep.
first.
Yeah, I would say that the TOD
Mhm.
would be
Yeah, that's
a good
important.
section, yes.
Yep, and there are a lot of, communities that are developing TOD plans and
That would be-
strategies,
Mhm.
Yeah.
for opportunities of investment. So that's
That'd be a
one
good
that
one.
stood out. And then, affordable and workforce housing is another one where, people are really pursuing. So as you're talking about, I know Polly's mentioned on a number, or Councilwoman Christensen has mentioned on a couple of occasions, wanting to go out and actively pursue and attract truly affordable housing developers
Right.
to the community. This is one
Way to get them in.
way to help get them in here. And I know so that's another example with affordable and workforce housing is, I know that there's not a desire for all truly affordable housing to be developed in these areas where a lot of that product, that stock currently exists. But what it does have the potential to do is if somebody's developing workforce market rate or above housing in these areas and is going to be responsible for the inclusionary housing the inclusionary housing policy and or payment in lieu, having these benefits in
It's
this
another
area
incentive, yeah.
for their workforce or market rate housing development helps to mitigate a little bit the extra expense of the inclusionary housing or payment in lieu or whatever they end up doing. So it has an opportunity to help, I think, really on all fronts of development of the full housing spectrum.
So I have another question, which is probably gonna be education. When an individual sells their residential
Mhm.
home, it used to be, and I don't know if there still is, you have a year to reinvest that capital.
Yes.
Can you reinvest that capital in an opportunity zone, or does it have to be into another residence?
No, you can reinvest that capital into an opportunity zone.
Okay.
The difference with the opportunity zone is that those dollars have to be reinvested into the opportunity zone within 180 days.
Oh,
So it's a
you don't get the
shorter
year.
timeline.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. But
And
then,
then probably go into a fund.
Mhm.
yeah, likely into a fund. Because if you're just buying another house and it happens to be in the opportunity zone,
You
you
don't
don't
get-
meet the criteria of either first use of that property, which is the greenfield development component, or substantial improvement to the property. Maybe if you're completely renovating the house or raising it and rebuilding, that's a possibility, but that's not really what it's intended for or likely to be a significant benefit from the residential housing.
Right. On the other
perspective.
hand, if you took a historic but not maintained neighborhood and
Mhm.
in infill rehabilitation.
Yes, absolutely.
And sold the houses at a profit, that
Yeah.
would be.
Yeah, and that's absolutely one of the intentions of the program is,
Oh, it is?
is that redevelopment piece.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I like that.
So wanted to get a little bit of input from you today on a couple of things. Obviously, no decisions are being made today. We're not developing an investment prospectus today. We'll be convening a group of, people that we think, Kimberly from the DDA, likely Kathy Fedler, and some others from city, Aaron Bostic from city staff, in a group to start to work on. We've done a lot of the assessment, but then the actual development of the investment prospectus for our community, which this document outlines what's really intended to be a part of the investment prospectus, so you can look at that, and if you have any thoughts or ideas on that. And we'll share the assessments and the analysis and all that stuff with you as we have it completed. But really wanting to get from you, and we'll certainly have to ask the others when we have an opportunity to, what role you as city council want to take in that process. Ultimately, we'll be bringing that investment prospectus back to you because we're gonna need your buy-in on that. Because again, we're not gonna be able to attract investment if we don't have a firm buy-in from, or solid buy-in from city council to kind of check that box of risk mitigation for investments. But is there a role in advance of that? Do any of you, some of you want to participate in actually the work to develop the investment prospectus, or just have us check in with you as we're developing it and then ultimately come back to you with a proposed investment prospectus for your feedback and input?
Do you think it would be helpful to have a council member on that or not?
Yeah, I mean, it couldn't hurt, and I think having a voice of this body, being actively involved in that, probably takes away some of the back and forth that might potentially happen at the end of the day, so long as that person is, participating as the voice of the council body.
It would
And
be,
is willing to bring that discussion back to
Exactly.
council as we proceed.
I think that actually, those kind of discussions is what I would like this Friday morning to be.
Mhm.
When you can just have a very loose discussion, and I would,
That would be something we could put on the agenda permanently, like boards, right?
yeah, why shouldn't we do that?
Yeah.
Boards and reporting. I would like to have the back and forth. I would like someone there that can keep us up to date as to what's going on and what the pluses and negatives of
I suspect that, well, possibly, Aaron and Bonnie would be good on the financial side of it, but certainly I would not be. On the other hand, there's also the aspect of possibly matching up the funds that are set up with some specific goals of specific parcels or
Sure.
specific
Mhm.
purposes.
Yep.
You know, that
Well,
any
so-
of us could consult on.
Right, wouldn't zoning take care of a lot of that as to what goes?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's the whole point of zoning, right?
Yeah, 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 and so having the adoption of Envision Longmont, the recent code update, ultimately having a housing policy are all going to help, again, influence where and how those, investments can be made, in our communities. So, I mean, I think we have a lot of the right components in place right now, to be as influential as possible, in addition to this investment prospectus that we can use to actively go out and pursue the types of investments that we want are really the ways, like I said, that we can be influential in how this tool is used in our community.
Right, for
What is the
example.
timeframe you think you will have the
We would like to have an investment prospectus completed by the end of the year,
end of this year?
end of this year.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Well, part of it is there's a 2026 sunset, 2025, sorry, sunset on the forgiveness and discount benefit, or not, I'm sorry, the deferment and discount benefits. And so those investments have to be made very, very soon. We actually, and anything that was, any property that was acquired after December 31st, 2017 is actually eligible to certify as an opportunity zone. So we actually got assessor's records for all transactions that have happened within the opportunity zone area and are actively
great.
outreaching to individuals that have acquired property to, and part of it is to be the kind of face and voice of this, so that when property owners and investors are using this outside of our sphere of influence, that we at least have those relationships and are understood as being kind of the opportunity zone go-to, so they have a willingness to
share
tell us
information.
when they're
Yeah.
using it, how they're using it, that kind of thing, because otherwise they have no requirement or liability to do that.
So, I went to the real estate luncheon that you guys put on, recently, and
Yeah.
I believe I remember a developer that, primarily specialized in Denver, but is now looking at Longmont areas. Is this, I think I remember him saying that like one of their properties they were looking at was
Yep.
within this opportunity zone.
Yes.
Is that's still the case?
Yes, yep. Yeah, so, and we know that there are a number of, TiVo owns a number of properties within the opportunity zone area, so we've had this conversation with them. Bonnie and I will hopefully be having a conversation with Brian Baer, relatively soon, and, cause he has obviously a significant investment in, he and his partners have significant investment in the opportunity zone area. And then Harold and, the mayor and I just met with, somebody who has been looking at the Second and Main area to invest in some property, had no idea about the opportunity zone, and now is even more excited about investing in the Second and Main area and doing some pretty cool
Well, no,
redevelopment there.
It's also interesting because as you get towards the TOD area of town, that allows you greater height if you include affordable housing. That's even another story on top, so we're talking up to 6 stories in that section of town, possibly speaking, and that's in the opportunity zone, so
Yep,
provides some interesting opportunities.
I think we should personally invest in that.
yeah.
I'm selling my house now.
Yeah.
We can pool our money, guys.
It's quite frankly being considered if, if it plays out the way it's intended to, really being considered the most significant federal economic development program that we've seen, in my lifetime, certainly. There's already been legislation introduced to, so what we've been told from the beginning is, this first set of designated opportunity zone census tracts across the country likely won't be extended beyond, the current kind of 2025 sunset for some of those benefits. Although investments can be made anytime, before, they can be made in 2025 and still take advantage of that, leave their investments into 2035 and still take advantage of that forgiveness on the return, but that those likely won't be expanded or extended. But if the first couple of years prove successful in terms of generating investment in these opportunity zone areas, there would potentially be future additional opportunity zone designations. And actually there's, I forget which congressman, but somebody has already introduced legislation to extend and expand the opportunity zone program that would dictate that there would be redesignation or new designation every 10 years, kind of similar to Colorado Opportunity or Enterprise Zone.
Enterprise zone.
Every 20
And our
years.
enterprise zone
Yes.
overlaps.
Yeah, and so that's the other thing too, is kind of layering the benefits of investment in those areas. So if you do a commercial development or commercial redevelopment in the opportunity zone area, what are the tools that are available locally and as a state that are going to help attract the businesses that are going to occupy those commercial development or redevelopment areas? And so we have the enterprise zone, and we have, you know, a variety of other tools that we use to attract businesses that we can layer on top of the opportunity zone benefits for the investment in that development or redevelopment.
Well, it would be my suggestion that after all the council has heard all this, we
Mhm.
designate somebody to, help you with that.
Okay. That would be, yeah, I think as involved as you guys can be in that conversation, throughout the entire process, I think it's gonna be more efficient and better for.
And I'm just speaking for me, but I'd like to have updates frequently.
Okay.
Well, and I know that while he's not here, and he's probably not the only member of council, but Councilmember Waters would be very invested in
Yeah.
any sort of river development.
Yes, yeah.
So,
Yeah, and so that's one of the things that we have to, and one of the things that's going to happen is not, so there will be opportunities, I have to find some, within that area for, projects
Do you want
that
me to look up
you
synonyms?
are very interested in forwarding, like, a performing arts center
Mhm.
or something like that. But then there are going to be private sector projects that, you know, we're gonna have to decide what private developments, we're going to put within that opportunity zone investment prospectus in order to attract investment to that. And so there's gonna be a little bit of interesting conversation. Certainly every development within that area is going to want to be included in that investment prospectus. So we'll have to figure out a way to determine what the goals and the vision are for the city in terms of the type of investment that we want to attract, and what of those private development projects or potential private development projects align with that. And that's going to have to be, you know, defensible and justifiable and all of those things. So that'll be probably the most complex portion of the development of the investment perspective.
So I have another question. I noticed that a lot of this is in residential areas that are already established. If someone, a developer or an investor wanted to come into one of those areas, specifically the east or west side historical, and scrape a building and
Mhm.
rebuild, would that
Yes.
be?
Yeah, that would be
or-
considered substantial improvement to the.
So that's something council has to decide, do we want that to actually happen in specific areas? And
And again, you can't decide whether or not that happens other than outside of,
The rules we
what,
already have.
yeah, the rules that we already
Exactly,
have
the
for
zoning.
land use and zoning and those
Exactly.
kinds of things.
however, if they just wanted to come in and make improvements and perhaps pop the top and build up, would that also would be, because it would be an improvement?
Potentially, so the terminology that is being used, and this is one of the points of clarity that we're trying to get, is substantial improvement. So,
So,
Okay. Yeah, that's
What's
be very
substantial?
tricky.
Yeah.
so if we, and I'm not sure that you're the right person to ask, Jessica. We have historical neighborhoods that have designated historical buildings in it.
Mhm.
Obviously, those are protected from being scraped and rebuilt,
generally
Yes.
speaking.
generally speaking.
Yeah, there's
People
always
still do it.
Yeah.
caveats.
Yeah,
We
but
undesignate.
to what extent do we have the ability to impose design standards so that the character of the neighborhood is preserved if the non-protected buildings,
You are correct that that is not a me question.
Yeah.
Well, that would
I
be
thought
in our
actually
codes.
it's an Aaron question.
Right, right.
Well, but I don't think our codes are that specific at this point.
No, but the planning and development services, like, there was an issue, an instance recently in the last few years where there was gonna be a small infill project where they built 3 townhouses per se on a lot, and Bonnie probably remembers, because I was on planning and zoning for that. And their original design was not necessarily conversant with the architecture of the neighborhood, and so planning and development basically made them go back and redesign it to make it look more
We have
like the
pretty
neighborhood.
good codes, we
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah,
So they do actually kind of protect the
feel of the
feel of the
neighborhood.
neighborhood as best that they
Yeah.
can.
So there's like,
It's a
the
requirement.
new brownstones on the west side are like that.
Yep.
They don't destroy the feel of the neighborhood.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I think the staff does a pretty good job of protecting that when there's clear instances where, okay, that's just not gonna fit in the uber modern design.
Yeah, even
and
what
it's-
Frank Lloyd
Or
Wright.
the neighborhood, I'm sure it doesn't have.
Well,
Oh,
that
yeah.
too, yeah. the
Exactly.
Folks are pretty protective of it too.
And that's good, so, sounds like there's a lot of opportunity here for our city to grow.
We're gonna take some pictures of you
And
guys.
attract,
I don't think so.
Sorry, but.
and attract private capital.
Well, Jessica, thanks.
Yes.
For
Oh.
updating us, and
Do you,
this is awesome.
have this in a PDF?
Yes, I will send all this to you electronically. I had a,
Thank you.
yes, I intended to have a presentation, but
You did.
You
did.
You had a presentation.
Yeah.
yes. There's also, so we've been working with an organization called Enterprise, who's really focused on ensuring, or helping to ensure and influence that the Opportunity Zone program doesn't go completely like private market driven, and
Yeah.
that communities have the tools to be able to drive and influence the type of investment that we desire. And they've done assessments of every single economic and prosperity assessments of every single census tract in the country that's designated as an opportunity zone. Those are like 25 pages for each census tract, so I intend to send those to you electronically so you can see some of the assessment that's already been done. I just didn't wanna waste the paper on printing all
Yeah,
of this,
thank
so,
you.
yeah.
Could you
Yeah,
get
so
that
I
to
will-
John and I too?
Yes, absolutely.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, it was great.
All right, who wants to
Loads of
start with their board reports?
Thanks,
You wanna start?
I will start.
And this is just an outline of what the prospectus will include.
Just really two things that stand out. I don't, I'm not gonna report on, never have, every single little thing that boards do. But, a couple things coming out of, the Senior Citizens Advisory Board. There is a very intriguing project going on about experiencing poverty. And anybody who's interested, I can send the application to, I'm not sure I'm up for it, frankly. I
What
figure
board
I-
is this?
But the Senior Citizens
Oh.
Advisory
And who's
Board.
putting it on?
What?
Who's putting it on? Is it the senior, our
No,
people, or
it's-
somebody coming in?
They're promoting it, and I think working with it, I can find it for you before.
You just send it to me.
Yeah, I'll send it to you, but I wanted everybody to know it was out there. I don't know whether I'm the only one who's getting lots of questions about water now that we have attracted attention to the subject by, extending the Linda Gap surcharge. But I'm getting a lot of questions about water. And, so the water board has decided that, or is undertaking the next round of, with the new building codes and, other information that they have that they didn't have before. A new assessment of the city's water requirement projections, and they expect to have that, by January or February. So that's a short answer that can be given to people with
I haven't gotten,
inquiries.
you must be the water.
It's cause I'm the water liaison probably, or because I campaigned on Windy Gap when I was running for this seat. I don't know, but people ask me a lot.
So I have a question for you. Did you get my email yesterday about the, new president at Excel for the area? Dr. Cobb?
Yes.
Yeah, and I sent it to you and Brian because I wondered, he had said at council about Excel pulling out of the southern, what's it called?
Yes,
So I'm wondering.
no, that you can't say it, I can't say it.
I can't say it, this.
But they did, and I actually think that it was, based on the way they acted, the way the Excel leadership acted at CML, I think that they have, maybe designs on this area, because I think that it hurt PRPA a lot more than it hurts them.
So,
to be an island.
my question is, because I don't know what level of leadership pulled out of that. With this new president for the area, perhaps we could restart that conversation again? And you.
That's an interesting question. I
Yeah.
don't know.
He has, the top leadership has changed, but the people underneath him haven't, and they're probably the ones that recommended that.
And that's what's changed, is the leadership under them. So you're saying the top probably recommended?
Well, I don't, it's
I
worth a
don't know.
conversation, but I
Exactly.
don't
It would be-
think it would change much, quite frankly. And usually in the larger organizations like that, it takes a while for the new guy to get that kind of influence.
We'll see, plus it's a new woman, so
Yeah.
that might,
Well, that
Right.
might help.
that might help.
That might help.
So anyway, I just thought, if you
Yeah.
could, cause you're involved in that, if you could just bring that up and say,
Yeah.
will this change that conversation and bring
Do you know
back
what her
our
name is?
partner? Jackson, just went out of my head.
Southwest Power Pool.
That's it, the Southwest Power Pool.
You knew it would come eventually.
It does.
So anyway, I just wanted to, ask that question if you
Yes,
and
that
Ryan would
is,
talk about that and
that's,
see if that would help at all to bring them back into the conversation.
yeah, that's
For our
a,
storage or
that's a
getting it
good
back on the
question.
grid, yeah.
It's, yeah, you know, if Excel is trying to expand its service area, that, in my opinion, pulling out was a strategic,
Mistake.
no.
Oh, I think it was a mistake,
I
'cause I'm
think it
thinking
was-
differently.
No,
Marcia
because-
thinks Excel wants to come take over PRPA.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
Yeah, well, that was the best thing they could do, to put PRPA in a weak position.
Actually, they work pretty well together, I think, but.
I don't know, I don't know whether they are or not, I just
Yeah.
think that.
Well, you have a new voice in it, at least.
It's worth a conversation. Any other?
I don't have any others than
Okay.
that that are.
How about you?
So, let's see, the, Longmont Youth Council is starting up their new drive for trick or treats for food, and they're gonna be challenging council
Oh,
again.
yes.
I would love to win, we haven't won in ages, but I'm one of the bad ones who forget to bring in the food. But they're also doing a, campaign on vaping, the dangers of vaping, which, these kids, they're amazing. They're doing an entire campaign hitting the schools and, having an art contest and possibly going to PTOs and PACs to actually educate the parents about their kids vaping, because it sounds like it's safer than smoking. So I was real impressed with that. Then the other one is, Dr. Cog, which, they're doing something very interesting that makes me a little nervous, is that every month they're going to pull out of a director's name out of a jar, and then that director has to, at the next meeting, give a presentation of their city, or have the city come in and do it. And Westminster did last week, and of course Herb Atkinson is the chair, so he did a huge production. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, who would we have do this? I talked to Jessica and perhaps Sean Lewis and.
Sandy could help coordinate that.
Oh, I'm sure I will definitely come to you, but I thought, please don't pull my name out.
Well, I'm sure
Please.
after a few
There-
cities have done it, then you'll feel more comfortable with that.
Yeah. So, and the other thing they're doing that is very interesting is that they are funding studies of projects within your city. And we have so many studies done that I think we should go after some of that money to fund these studies. And most of them have to do with urban development, and of course, transportation. So I'm gonna talk to Harold about those two, is that we need to get moving on this, getting some of that money, new money, into our city instead of spending another 50 grand on another study. So somebody else pay for it.
Yep, that's a
So,
great idea.
That's basically it.
Erin?
Unless you wanna hear about fast tracks. Anybody wanna hear about fast tracks?
Oh, yes, you can tell us about fast tracks.
Well, the investor partners group that is interested in investing in the peak service will be at the next MCC meeting, November 1st. I'm pretty excited about that. We're having problems, and I am a little annoyed at BNSF, and I don't know if it's BNSF or if it's RTD, but we cannot get a cost analysis from them. And we have everything else ready. We're waiting for the cost analysis with BNSF. To lease the line, to look at drainage problems, et cetera, everything that would go, what would it cost if they operated it versus RTD? We have the other costs down. It'll be a little over $1 million for RTD's cost, less O&M. That's not much at all for the peak service. So, there's gonna be a conference call today, and it's funny, BNSF said to, RTD, 3 people from RTD called me last week. I said, yeah, we've been having conference calls with, conference meetings with RTD saying, you've got to move on this. We're all waiting for that. That's the only thing we're waiting for. So, I'm anxious to see what this conference call does.
Well, good.
Cause I only have a year left.
I
And I want it done.
I know
dang it.
exactly how you feel.
It's like, come on, just give us an analysis. Can't be that hard. But it must
But
be.
you don't know who's doing the analysis?
Well, Henry Stoppelkamp, who is the head engineer for all of the rail lines, has a contact at BNSF. And for some reason, the contact will talk to absolutely no one but Henry, which annoys me, because I don't know what they're saying to each other, and I have to know. So, I want Harold in on those conversations, because he's done this in San Angelo. He knows what he's doing. So he keeps saying, well, I'll just wait for you to tell me when I can do it, Joan, and as far as I'm concerned, you can do it now. Get in on those calls. So that's where my frustration is right now, is that there are only 2 people talking, and I think it should be a bigger audience.
Well, I appreciate you working on that. Although it doesn't matter to me anymore,
I know.
you would have.
Plus, as far as RTD goes, we fought very hard to get the LD1 and LD2 bus lines from being cut. And they're going to be financed through May of next year, I think it is. There was some grant money left over that someone didn't tell someone about, or I don't know what the story is really. So, we have to boost up our bus ridership on the LD2 and LD1. And in February is when they're gonna, when they do another ridership count. So I'm gonna try to get some more people on that bus during February.
Oh, that's the one that goes up 287, right?
It does, it goes up to 87 and then hooks up to 36 and goes right to Union.
Right.
And I take that bus.
That's the old local, yeah.
I take that bus and there's always about 20 people on it, but the problem with RTD is they count ridership from point to point. So if you get on in Longmont, but then you get off at Lafayette for a job, or they don't count you.
Well, see, that's not right.
No, if you get on in Longmont and get off in Union, then you're considered a rider. It's only point to point. So if you get off at Louisville or Broomfield.
Which is what most people do. That's
Yeah.
why they
Yes.
take the
That's
local
the point.
instead of the
Exactly.
express.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes no sense whatsoever.
And there are
All the
stops
points.
along 287 that are not necessarily designated city stops, they're just street stops.
Mhm.
And people get on and off there all the time.
Yeah.
They should
So-
count all the points, I would think,
Yeah,
to
and
get a
I-
true understanding of where the ridership is.
Yeah, Judy and I met with David Genova, the COO, and the head
Oh,
project.
that's crazy.
And he
On
said,
that
this is
line in particular,
ridiculous.
yeah.
A rider is a rider. They don't count them. So that's why they keep saying Longmont's ridership is low. They are always using that against us, but.
They
hopefully-
wouldn't know.
No.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So you can print that. Please.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yep, that's it, that's all I got.
Okay.
FOIA request for that data.
So, for the third month in a row, I believe, planning and zoning has canceled their meeting.
Oh, no.
The Historic Preservation Commission got to see the design, the prospective design of what will be the new Tangerine restaurant here in downtown.
When will that open?
Next year, I believe. I mean, they're going through a lot of steps because it's a historically designated building, so they're also trying to get tax credits to do their improvements and things like that. But it'll essentially be all white, with tangerine colored trim and awning, and they're gonna make a little patio. I think it looked really nice personally, compared to kind of what it looks like at the moment. Because they're actually gonna wrap the entire building instead of not just the front. So the back will also be white, and they're gonna use like a muralist to do some artwork on the sides of the building, which is now currently just graffiti. So that was just kind of anecdotally interesting. Let's see, the art in public places, I believe there's an article coming out today or tomorrow in the Times Call talking about its 30-year anniversary. As well as the fact that because of Nextlight, it has quite a bit of funding. And so talking about those two issues. And so what they're looking at doing is the Pratt Street overpass bridge. I don't know if you've ever seen, but the base of it has these kind of like, they kind of look like it's paneled look. And so what they're thinking of having 30 different artists do like some sort of piece of artwork that would be installed on each panel.
Oh, that'd be great.
So that's what they're thinking of doing for that. And then Visit Longmont is actively engaging stakeholders, so they had a meeting of stakeholders, about 21 of them, to do what they're calling a signature event. And so they've narrowed it down to three concepts that they're going to present to a larger public forum for comment. The three were Harvest Festival, one was called like Downtown Mashup or something like that, where they pair two different businesses downtown that don't have much in common necessarily. Yeah, that sounds interesting. And then the other one I didn't quite get, but they were really excited about was Theme Park Festival. So I'm not exactly sure how that would work either, but those were the three.
Bring in a Ferris wheel
I
and a
guess
roller
so.
coaster.
Some sort of theme park festival. And so those are the three that they narrowed down to, and they'll be presenting to, like I said, a larger public forum at sometime when they can organize. It'll be at the Dickens Opera House when they do the larger presentation. So outside of that, I don't think there's too much going on. The Golf Advisory Board passed an official resolution supporting the bond initiative. So not too much else.
Alright. Sister Cities is actively recruiting students for the next exchange. They have,
Oh, I saw that.
yeah, they have, I believe they have all of their chaperones now. They interviewed those and picked those, I believe, already, but the students and they've gotten a lot more applications because what they're doing now, this is pretty interesting. They've had Silver Creek and Skyline and Longmont, I believe, nominate kids, have the teachers nominate kids who would be excellent, people to go to be part of the exchange. So then the kids get a letter from Sister City saying, you've been nominated, and here's the application process, we hope you apply. You've been nominated by your teacher, and so they've gotten a lot more applications.
Oh, that's great.
It was a great idea.
Yeah.
I can't remember whose idea that was, but it makes the kids feel good that they've been recognized
And
by
the
their
parents.
teachers and their
Yeah.
parents, and it expands the reach of who knows about the program. So I imagine we're gonna get, some excellent ambassadors to go to Chino and Guzman this next year. So that was exciting news. That was about the only new thing I can think of on all the boards. The museum was this week, and I missed it because I had a conflicting meeting, but we know that they're working on getting their tier up on the science SF.
The CFD.
Yes, that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so,
That's exciting.
and the new director's doing a great job. She really is. Everybody has enjoyed working with her, I think. The economic development, they've got their hands full with this and several other things. We've got a fundraising effort going on, that I'm helping her a little bit with, so that's good. Gave a presentation to the Rotary, the Thursday afternoon Rotary on our bond issues. They seemed to be well received by those guys. It sounded, I didn't have any hard questions that I couldn't answer, so that was good. Things like that. What else? That's all I think I have. Anything else we should talk about this morning?
I just wanted to mention one thing about parking. So there's the council parking underneath this garage is not restricted on Fridays. It gets too complicated to try to figure that out for the Fridays prior to a regular session. Most staff don't realize that. And so rather than restrict that and give tickets on Friday morning for the hour-and-a-half meeting, my suggestion